Senior Research Associate at SERP, and she is a LUMS graduate and has been a project manager at LUMS. So the discussants I can introduce once the presentation has been made, as I invite you for your contribution. But at the outset, I'd like to sort of offer some comments. So Manur is going to be presenting some insights based on, I think, research undertaken by a consortium of academics from Harvard and MIT and LSE who've been working on property tax for more than 10 years, mostly in the Punjab. And they had very sort of meticulously designed interventions, and these are all randomized controlled trials, and they were very meticulously designed and executed with a lot of hard work. I know that because I was a counterpart working, trying to get the first intervention off the ground in the government of Punjab as PRMP when Asim Khaja and Adnan came to see me with this proposal, and and that was also actually partly DFID funded, the PRMP, but PRMP was mostly ADB funded the whole program. So I'm giving this background because for two things: A, that we have some background of what's going on, but also that this has been going on for a long time. It's not just started yesterday. This I'm talking about 2008 and 9. And so one of the big things that we were supposed to do was resource mobilization at the provincial level, and property tax was one of the bigger interventions. And we basically designed an incentive program, or the team did, and the government was then convinced by the program to fund the incentive scheme. And it was the largest, probably with the biggest outlay any RCT has globally. It was a huge randomized control trial, the first one. Yeah, yeah. And then they graduated that into another program that she's going to talk about, and hopefully also the third experiment that you're going to talk about today. So there's a background and learning that fed into different RCTs in this. So over to you, Banu. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mujtaba, for the introduction, for setting all of this up. I'll just dive straight into it. I'll be discussing three studies by Asim Adnan and co-authors today. I'm going to skim over the first two. The first two focus on incentivizing tax collectors. I'm skimming over those because I want to focus on the most recent study that they've completed, which is the third one, which is strengthening the social compact, basically revitalizing the tax service link, the property tax service link in Punjab. There are many ways to, of course, build trust in the state, but one of the ways is to do it through a high visibility link like property tax and municipal services. And so, we'll talk more about, the insights that we've gained throughout this process. This was completed just recently in 2023, so we're still in the analysis stage. I won't be, sharing like concrete endline findings today, but they're emerging findings that we can all benefit from today. All right, so I'll start with the first study. I think we're all quite well versed in the problems that plague property taxation, so I won't get into those, and I'll just dive in. Right, so this first study is essentially, trying to incentivize tax collectors to increase revenue collection by linking their pay to performance, which is not usually the case. It's usually linked to other things like education or tenure or some other, political factors. And so this, again, as Dr. Mujtaba already said, it was a big RCT. involved nearly all tax circles in Punjab, so 482. And there were three schemes that they introduced. The first was the revenue only scheme, right? So tax collectors were told that if you collected tax revenue above a certain pre-specified benchmark based on historical data, then you would get 20 to 40% of that revenue. So that was the revenue only scheme. That was the first incentive. The second scheme was a revenue plus scheme. It was the same as the revenue only scheme. The only difference was that the tax collectors would also be judged on taxpayer satisfaction and whether they had assessed property tax liability accurately or not. And then the third one, flexible bonus scheme, was simply, it was just an end of the year bonus scheme in which it was up to the performance evaluation committee to decide who they wanted to reward, how much bonus they wanted to give, or how much they wanted to pay. So it wasn't as structured as the first two schemes. And so, well, the results were that incentives do work. The incentives increased revenue by around 10 percentage points. And by the way, so this increase in revenue, it didn't happen because there were more properties being taxed or properties were being overtaxed or anything like that. Most of this came from tax collectors focusing on a few high value properties in circles and taxing them at their true tax liability. So that's one. And secondly, by increasing their tax base. And the study goes out of its way to let us know that, or to imply really, that it's not that these were new properties that just propped up. These were properties that tax collectors were aware of previously, but there was a greater incentive here to now add them onto the tax roll. And in terms of which schemes worked the best, the revenue scheme worked the best. It had the largest effect on revenue collection. The flexible bonus scheme didn't work at all. The intermediary revenue plus scheme, that worked as well, but it didn't have as large an effect as the revenue scheme. And so really, the bottom line here is that performance pay, if it's properly designed with, factors taken into account, it can increase performance. But there also needs to be a citizen grievance redressal mechanism. So what I mean by that is that sure, you can whatever policy you implement or whatever intervention you implement, that might have distortionary effects, right? So one of the fears of this study was that if we increase the bargaining power of tax collectors, then bribes might go up, or other certain distortions might take place, and that might affect taxpayer satisfaction, or tax collectors might start messing with the assessment of the property. Sorry, tax collectors might start messing with the assessment of the properties, might overtax, or so on and so forth. And so at least this study found that there was no change in taxpayer satisfaction or assessment accuracy. Those weren't affected in this case. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next one. The next study was a follow-up study to this one, and the concept is the same, except that now tax inspectors are being incentivized through postings. And so they're told at the beginning of the tax year that if you collect a certain amount of revenue by the end of the tax year, then you're going to have a preference. Then you're going to be able to choose your preferred tax circle. And that the paper goes into a lot of detail on how that happens, on the mechanisms involved, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip that and just come to the results, which was that, again, performance-based postings also seem to work, and they actually have quite a comparable effect. They have like 2/3 as large an effect as I mentioned for the performance-based study, which was around 10 percentage points. And also, again, the paper has a lot of insights if anyone's interested, but another interesting insight was that if preferences are similar, if most of the tax collectors are really vying for the same circles, or then that increases competition, and that also increases the incentive to exert more effort. All right. Now I will move on to this study. I can go forever. I can talk about social compact forever, because I've myself have been leading it for the past 3 years now. Sorry, let me just go back to, where do I go? Right. So So this study is actually, this isn't a province-wide study. It took place in Lahore and Faisalabad, so 500 neighborhoods in Lahore and Faisalabad, and we introduced 3 interventions: voice, local allocation, voice-based local allocation. I think these terms are not too not too intuitive for for citizens, and so we actually changed the names of these interventions. Voice is essentially a demand scheme, right? So all we do is we make tax collectors. We, by the way, collaborated with the Excise and Taxation Department in Punjab for this. So we make tax collectors visit households and collect taxpayers' preferences on which municipal services they would like. So that's just that. We're collecting demand. And then the tax collectors collect these preferences and they forward these preferences to the local government department. And then the government department is, they're free to either use these preferences to provide those services or not. They're not bound by anything here. And then the second one, the local allocation scheme, which we, for citizens call the delivery scheme. In this, we ensure that 35% of the property tax collected from a particular neighborhood is for sure spent on the delivery of municipal services in that neighborhood, right? This doesn't have a preference component to it. So the local government department's engineer, he goes and evaluates the neighborhood, he assesses which services are required, and and he forwards his recommendation, and then those are provided using the 35% revenue. And then the last one, the voice-based local allocation, which is a combination of the first two, which is why we call it demand and delivery, which is that we collect preferences and we also deliver municipal services using that 35% figure according to the taxpayers' preferences, right? So it combines both preferences and the fact that the tax is actually being spent on services. Okay, right. I just wanted to share some, this should probably have been in the motivation, but these are some baseline figures from 2016 to 2017 in which we gauged tax morale among our sample. And so you will see a bunch of statements, right, that we posed to our taxpayers and asked them to let us know to what extent they agree or disagree with that statement. And so if you've got stuff like government has helped me in the last year, do you agree with that or not? It is important for citizens to pay taxes, do you agree with that or not? And you'll see that figures are, like I've highlighted the max percentages in each row, and you'll see that, tax morale is not great. You've just got about 44% of the sample saying that it's important for citizens to pay taxes, right? What else? You've got just 35%. You've got just 23% and 5% respectively, somewhat agreeing and strongly agreeing with the fact that the government has helped me in the last year, and so on and so forth. And if you come there to the last 3 rows, we ask them, all right, what do you think? What fraction what fraction of taxpayers in your neighborhood pay taxes, right? And you've got only 33% saying that, 80, giving you an 80 to 100% figure. And, that's the most important one, I think. What fraction of taxes are spent on services? You've got 55% saying that only 0 to 20% of my tax is being spent on services. So that's, pretty telling. All right, so I just want to give you a sense of the tech that we used. So, and also some of the components of the project. So we had we trained tax collectors in a smartphone application that we built to collect preferences. And so, tax collectors would, then go household to household and collect preferences on these apps. This is, by the way, really important. Like, it has an important psychological impact. Like, when your tax inspector is going with your tax bill, but he's also then not just asking you for that money, he's also asking you for your preferences, which I think is quite, psychologically, it could be quite psychologically powerful if done in a certain way. And this is not the only instance of us using smartphone applications. I'll talk about certain marketing schemes later on, in which we actually had tax collectors go to people's households and advertise the service delivery that we'd done. For those as well, we use smartphone apps. We had around 3 to 4 service delivery rounds in this entire project. From 2016 through 2023. And we built apps to monitor service delivery, to monitor contractors, to monitor our own field team that was also helping implement this. And I myself designed most of these apps, and so I made sure that data collection and data integrity checks were very robust. So the data you're going to get from this project is, I can ensure you is really rock solid. Um, right, and another important thing, actually, we also worked with the Lahore Waste Management Company and the Faisalabad Waste Management Company to help them in their trash collection efforts. So we built apps for that as well, in which we would, in our field team would go into the field and see, all right, which trash collection points need clearing, and then we would flag those to the WMC, and then their team would go and then clear those trash points. So that was a recurring service which we, I think, carried on for a long time, probably a year. All right. Sorry, these are just some tables. These are baseline preferences, that people expressed. We had street lights on our menu, road carpeting, trash removal, dumpsters, and sorry, this has had another experimental reason for which I included these, but I'm going to discard that now. But you can see here that preferences were similar in at baseline in the voice and voice-based local allocation, which is demand delivery neighborhoods. And preferences there's some variation in preferences by region. But again, this is just baseline. So preferences do change over the course of other rounds. So just, don't really focus on this. Right. So these are, again, was another app through which at baseline surveyors went and they assessed the quality and the quantity of service delivery at baseline. You can just see some of that work. And when we actually started service delivery, I'll just show you an example here. This was, for instance, road quality at baseline, and after we were done, this was the road quality. All right. So 1 second. All right. So what we actually discovered was that it's not enough to just provide services. You need to market these services as well. Citizens need to know that this work has been done, and because cognitive bandwidth is limited, people have 1,000 other things to do, and so that's an incredibly important aspect of the whole thing, to increase salience through marketing. And so what we did was there were a bunch of marketing interventions that we implemented. The first was actually a phone-based information intervention in which we called up around 20 to 22,000 taxpayers, and we reminded them of previous service delivery rounds that we'd done. And we also first we actually tested their recall of whether they remembered the previous service delivery that had been done. And what we found was, by the way, recall was low. I'll explain that in a bit. And then we, after testing recall, then we reinforced the work that had been done. We also, we actually went a step ahead and we showed them pictures of the work that had been done. We distributed flyers to them as well, so that link could be reinforced. Right. So, I think at this point, this intervention happened in 2021. And at this point, I believe recall was low because the previous service delivery round that we'd done and the marketing that had succeeded that, there was a significant gap between the two. And, the quality of service delivery is also an issue, right? Services have a high rate of decay, at least in my experience. And so if you're, delivering a service in Feb, or you're repairing a pothole in Feb, and you are advertising it, 5 to 6 months later, that pothole's already decayed. So what exactly are you advertising, right? And there was a delay in our marketing and our service delivery efforts. There was a gap, basically because of COVID. That messed with things, but we rectified for that in our last round of service delivery and marketing interventions that we did 2022 to 2023, in which we made sure that the time between service delivery and marketing almost happened in parallel. So that's what we ensured. And I'm actually pretty excited to see those results. I don't have them yet, as to whether they increased salience and improved taxpayer trust in the state and so on and so forth. But just to quickly let you know that, so there was this phone-based information intervention. Then we also had a text message intervention. We texted people. We also included the flyer link, the scheme flyer link in that, and monitored click rates as well. Kitne log click kar rahe hain uske upar, kitne nahi kar rahe, etc. And text message interventions, they have limited efficacy. Our click rates were, not that high, and so, we also supplemented this with other interventions. So हमने banners और posters design किए थे जो advertise कर रहे थे scheme को. So we also installed these all over our neighborhoods, जो भी हमारी treated neighborhoods थी. And I'll just show you some pictures of that. So ये इस तरह के हमने posters हमने लगाए थे. Demand scheme, delivery scheme, demand delivery scheme. But then we also thought that, there's perhaps, I mean, the PIs, the Asim and everyone, they love these flyers, but we thought that they could be improved. And so in our last iteration, we actually updated these. And ये आपको I think नजर नहीं आएंगे, but what we did was basically we added service delivery pictures as well. उनके नीचे हमने लिखा कि in which year they were provided. We also emphasized the scheme tagline. You can't see it here, I think, but for instance, delivery का था आपका tax आप पर खर्च बड़ा सा, और पंजाब हुकूमत आपकी जो है वो services आपके ऊपर ही spend करी, इस तरह की taglines थी. We also added a map showing service delivery locations. That image is a little dark, the one on the extreme right, but you can see, people looking at it. And then we also put in a QR code, as you can see, and also a phone number. If they didn't trust the QR code, then they could, go for the SMS number. We incentivize them to engage with these posters by putting in the promise of a smartphone lottery, that if you, engage and you're selected, then you're going to get a smartphone. So, marketing efforts of that nature. Right. So again, I can't give you endline findings on willingness to pay because we're still analyzing. But the important takeaways are that yes, tax collector side of things is important. Yes. But as we've also discussed, in these sessions, is that focusing on taxpayer trust is also incredibly important. Building taxpayer trust is, it's a complex process and lots of things that have to be taken into consideration. Also, another takeaway is the role of tech. Tech definitely, especially when combined with rigorous monitoring and evaluation, and also feedback. So, like we gave feedback to our collectors as well, and our teams as well when they were collecting data, right? So in real time, we were processing it, and we were like, all right, ये आप ठीक नहीं करे, इसको यहाँ fix करें, या ये नहीं करे, वो नहीं करे. So it was a really robust process. Also, what is great about social compact is that, I mean, you're not in the traditional sense or in the official sense of a financial cost, वो नहीं है. मतलब, you're just taking existing tax revenue and you're allocating a percentage of that to service delivery. And the last thing I just want to emphasize is, of course, this wouldn't have been possible without the continuing year-on-year cooperation of the Punjab Excise and Taxation Department, as well as the local government department, as well as urban unit. Dr. Omar Masood and I haven't interfaced directly, but he's a huge reason that social compact analysis is even, and social compact, there were lots of components that were facilitated because of his approval and because of his help. And I also know that not only because of my own experience, but because a lot of internal meetings that we have with our PIs, in which Dr. Masood is often lauded. So would be great to have more figures, of course, like him. But yes, that's about it. And thank you.
Excellent. That is great, and it's great to see that my own research actually was going in parallel with starting from 2010 onwards, when I was doing my PhD on this, which was more qualitative, and Asim and Adnan were going through with the very cutting edge kind of quanti work, which was around RCTs, and of course, RCTs have gotten a big boost since Duflo and her husband got the Nobel Prize. So it's I'm almost regretting having criticized their work in my book, but I mean that is there, and so I'd pitch in as we go along, but. We have discussants, and the first on the list here is Dr. Turab Hussain, is a professor at LAMS and has interests in multiple issues, worked with government and a lot of things, but has research interests in policy, public policy, migration, poverty, rural development, and all. And knowing his background is firmly entrenched, very grounded in rural areas also. So why is it, apart from your views on it, one general question I last discussants is that why is it that the intervention that they're doing is of an intermediary, taking the concerns of the taxpayer, the voice, to do something? Why is it not happening? Why does it have to be three professors and a team here who have to come collect that voice, articulate it, and pass it on to the service providers, right? So your views on
Experts, it's just a disclaimer. I'm an economist and I'm no expert in public finance or taxation. But recently, I think a year or so ago, we did some work on KP tourism and using sort of tourism tax as an instrument to sort of protect the environment, because as a consequence of large number of people going, there's a challenge. There is an environmental challenge. There's a challenge on infrastructure also, but I'll come to that later. And I would want to address the question which you asked. As an economist, when you look at and also somebody who's interested in economic history, if you look at sort of taxation, number one, I think somebody here said that people are willing to pay taxes. Actually, no, people nowhere want to pay taxes. Okay, so tax avoidance is part and parcel of whether that be a developed country or a developing country. Of course, that doesn't mean that the compact between the state and the citizen has broken down. They know that, they have to pay taxes because there's an obligation, and if they don't, there's a high penalty. Now, yes, one would be willing, in addressing your question, one would be willing to pay for services clearly. So if I know that if I give a sum of money and I get a good health services, I could get good education services for my children, I get street lights in my neighborhood, then yes, I'll be willing to pay some money. Okay, so in some sense, we have to go back to the market. Okay, and I think the last paper which Manur, excellent presentation by the way, goes to that. If in a developing country, and because of institutional issues, it's difficult to re-establish that compact between the state and the citizen, perhaps then the state needs to start delivering services, and then by that, this sort of, in some sense, breakdown is going to be fixed or resurrected. Now, going back to the work which we did, and it was sort of similar because, and it's been motivated by the fact in the last 10 years, there's been a resurgence of domestic tourism in this country. And because of infrastructural developments, there are roads which are connecting all parts of the country to Gilgit-Baltistan, going through KP. Swat has opened up. So you have literally hundreds of thousands, millions of people every year, domestic tourists, who are actually going to those areas. And as I said, that poses a challenge to the environment, to sustainability, and also to physical infrastructure in those areas. So a question was asked that, whether you could have things like a tourism cess or as a tourism tax collected in KP, for example, which could then be used, channel that money is used to protect those areas, the villages, the communities, for sustainability purposes, and also build infrastructure which is required there, physical infrastructure. So this basically goes into this whole idea of connecting tax to service delivery, in the sense when people know that this money which is being collected is going to go there to give you better services, there'll be greater willingness to pay. So in that, what we saw was that the given system which KP has, there are multiple. So you have KPRA, which collects sales taxes on services. So one way would be that, all right, the money which is being collected, the revenue which is being collected through services taxes on hospitality industry in the area, goes into the provincial pool. So a part of it is ring fenced or hypothecated that it will go back to that area. Okay, so a chunk of money is collected, say, for example, provision. So you can have maybe solid waste collection system and an incinerator plant. Okay, so that can be done. The other is excise and taxation. So excise and taxation, they tax hotel rooms. So you could, and there's a tobacco development cess. So, you know, you could have a tourism cess. So money which is collected through hotels is then hypothecated and ring fenced and is spent there. But after speaking to officials, we saw that that would be very difficult to do actually. Okay, hypothecation, ring fencing, money, and so on. Then we actually started looking at the various authorities which are in operation in KP. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the Galiad Development Authority, GDA actually collects property tax. Okay, it's a tax on transfers of property, new properties, and so on. They collect a conservation tax. Then there's a water tax which they collect, and they also provide services. Now, the mechanism of the authority, and GDA is an old authority. There are other authorities like the Kahan Development Authority and various others which are also upcoming. So their mandate is pretty similar. So it's the board which then decides how to spend that money. Okay. Now, the board is not a democratic entity. And interestingly, you know, they say that you cannot be a member of the board if you have a conflict of interest. And a conflict of interest is that if you have any business in that area. Now, that is inherently problematic because what the authority is doing is what the local government should have been doing. Obviously, local government is completely absent there. So GDA, in fact, and all these authorities are in mechanisms or institutions which are already there by which such hypothecation and ring fencing could be done. But the problem is they're not democratic. Okay, they're not accountable to anybody. Okay, yes, the board is independent, but is the board reflecting the preferences of the community or the hospitality industry or the tourism service providers who are there? They're not. Okay. So they could de facto pretend to be like the local government, but actually they're not. So the point we're trying to make is that you cannot have this compact without local governments being operational and municipal taxes where actually citizens get to see the service being delivered and then it incentivizes them to pay. Okay. So I think that is one. The final thing which we saw was the complexity of the government in KP. You know, you have KPRA, which is collecting sales tax on services. Then you have excise and taxation, which on the hospitality tourism sector, they collect taxes from hotel rooms. Okay, 50% occupancy is their formula. Then you have KPCTA, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Cultural Tourism Authority, which is also can collect cess, fee, taxes. Okay, I mean, they can obviously toll taxes and fees on museums or whatever tourist resorts which they can, but they're within their ambit, they can collect taxes. Then you have the integrated tourism zones which have been developed. These are like free trade areas and they also have the same authorities. Okay, now look at the number of institutions which are there. Then you have GDA and various development authorities which are again collecting taxes. And then you have the dysfunctional local governments. So it's a complete spaghetti bowl. Okay, so you need to rationalize the state also, the subnational state. Okay, because at the moment it's a complete confusion. Okay, and one way to do it, of doing it is actually to strengthen your local bodies. Okay, and limit the powers of these authorities which are essentially non-democratic. Okay, so I'm sorry, I think I took more time, but that was my 2 cents on this.
Please.
सर वी ट्राइड जो आपका फार्मूला है रिसाइकलिंग, हम इसको रिसाइकलिंग कहते हैं कि जी नारान और जो एरियाज़ हैं कागान नारान, वहाँ से जितनी टैक्स कलेक्शन हॉस्पिटलिटी की होगी वो वहीं पर होगी. हमने लेजिस्लेशन भी करवाई, वहाँ तक तो हमारा बस चलता है, लेकिन आपने बड़ा खूबसूरत वो डेमोक्रेटिक वाला यूज़ किया कि जो लगाने वाले लोग हैं वो तो हमारे काबू में नहीं है, तो हमने उन लोगों को मीठी गोली भी दी, वो उन्होंने खा भी ली और हमें टैक्स भी दिया. और हमारे लेजिस्लेशन में भी है कि ये वाला रेवेन्यू वहाँ रिसाइकल होगा, लेकिन वहाँ पर बस KPRA का ख़त्म हो जाता है ना। आपको पता है कि कोई भी अथॉरिटी इन्फोर्स नहीं कर सकती कि यहाँ पर आप लगाएंगे, लेकिन हमारे लॉ में है और स्टिल वी आर गेटिंग टैक्स फ्रॉम नारायण, जो कि 1947 से कोई नहीं ले सका था। ये रिसेंट है, 2020 में हमने किया था। एक सर आपने बात की बड़ी ज़बरदस्त है टूरिज्म टैक्स की। KP में इसके अपोजिट है। अपोजिट इस तरह है कि ITZs बन रही हैं, जो आपने जिसका जिक्र किया। तो हमें हुक्म दिया गया कि जी जो एग्जिस्टिंग टैक्सेस हैं वो भी एग्जेम्प्ट करा लें। तो हमने ग्रैंड समरी लिखी है 4-5 टैक्स कलेक्टिंग एजेंसीज की तरफ से। प्रोविंशियल कैबिनेट ने इनफैक्ट वैसे SIFC की वो डायरेक्टिव्स थी, उसको कोई रिजिस्ट भी नहीं कर सकता, आपको पता है, जो स्पेशल इंसेंटिव इन्वेस्टमेंट वो है, उनकी डायरेक्टिव्स हैं कि जी टूरिज्म टैक्स तो बहुत दूर की बात है कि आप कह रहे हैं कि वो लें। उन्होंने हमसे KPRA से, एक्साइज से, बोर्ड ऑफ रेवेन्यू से ट्रांसफ़र और लीज पे टैक्सेस हमने फॉर अ पीरियड ऑफ 30 ईयर्स, वो टैक्सेस नहीं है लीज वाला, 30 ईयर्स के लिए हमसे माफ़ करवाएं। तो बड़ा अजीब सा है।
मैं थोड़ा सा इसमें ऐड कर दूं, जो बड़ी, इफ़ यू अलाउ मी मुश्तबा, ये जो आपने बात की है ना, एक्चुअली वो देयर इज अ पेपर एंड यू कैन हैव अ लुक एट इट व्हिच वी रोट ऑन दिस। ये जो ITZs है, इन ये देर ऑल्सो एग्जेम्प्ट फ्रॉम एक्सटर्नल रेगुलेशन। सो जो फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट है, जो एनवायरनमेंट है, ये अपनी इंटरनल रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज़ है इनकी, और रेगुलेटरी सिस्टम्स है विच कैन बी रियली प्रॉब्लमैटिक एक्चुअली। और एक ITZ जो है वो आपको पता है ठंडियानी में है, और ठंडियानी इज इन पार्ट ऑफ अ यूबिया नेशनल पार्क। तो वहाँ जो डिग्री ऑफ डिफॉरेस्टेशन होने लगी या हो रही है, सो यू नो यू दीज आर रियल कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज ऑफ दीज थिंग्स विच वी।
चल रहा है, वो कोई इशू नहीं है, लेकिन उसको हर वहाँ पर गुड्स मैन्युफैक्चर होती हैं और
जी
वो गुड्स मेंट फॉर एक्सपोर्ट भी होती हैं। तो देखिए वहाँ पर कॉन्सेप्ट दूसरा है। वो इसी कॉन्सेप्ट को हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर में ले आए। हॉस्पिटैलिटी में कौन आता है, वो सर्विसेज एक्सपोर्ट भी नहीं होती, हमारे लोकल लोग आते हैं। लोकल मीन अदर देन कागान नारायण के। तो कुछ अजीब सा उन्होंने किया है कि ITZ का कॉन्सेप्ट तो ठीक है, लेकिन किस सेक्टर के लिए वो फ्रूटफुल है। यहाँ पर वो कहते नहीं जी आप ITZ को हम देते हैं इनकम टैक्स, FBR को भी रिक्वेस्ट की कि इसका इनकम टैक्स भी 30 ईयर्स के लिए माफ कर दो। तो देयर आर इश्यूज, वो सारी चीज़ आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं होती है।
Thank you very much. Omar, you have an intervention.
Yes, it's just to answer the question that you asked, is that why are people from Harvard, MIT, and Esther Duflo doing these things, and why we have not thought about these things? After all, we are part and parcel of this fabric. Um my simple answer to that is, and that is a question which has been asked by the team at the urban unit also, whenever we have a Zoom meeting with either there are a couple of our cities which are going on, which in which urban unit is actually supporting, and before the Zoom meeting I have an internal meeting, and I am the sole vote supporting it. The rest of my team always advocate that we need to exit. Why are we supporting them? This is excise and taxation data, and you are giving them access and all that. Honestly, Mujtaba, and this is because I've just had lunch and I want to be honest, at least. So, uh, honestly, we feel that the work which they are doing is the work that we should have done, but we did not do. And time has passed by, and either we are, either the system has sort of, or the culture has actually developed that we don't have that elbow room anymore. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give them the elbow room as much as I can, that the day when their paper comes and shows differences, and significant differences between these interventions. Build up this momentum, have a snowball effect that perhaps it will be Ben Olkan or Esther Duflo or Asim Ijaz Khwaja which will be making that local government change and not us. Because I've tried in this system, when they actually placed me in the urban unit, I was a direct match with my skill set in the urban unit. The system is just so rule bound and it just does not give you space. So these are the allies that at least at my personal level that I'm trying to create, because every time I'm asked this question, so why are we perpetuating this relationship with these academics who we do not know? They are going to print their paper, and then they are never going to respond to our emails. We said let's totally forget about it. This thing is really important in the sense that even the chairman PND, and there have been a series of chairman PND who have already asked me that why are we engaging in this thing, and I've always told them that if we partner with them, our validation level with the political economy goes up by a notch. They would steamroll me, but they would not steamroll Harvard or MIT or anything like that. And they will think twice, regardless of whosoever is the chief minister. I can tell you that. So this is very strategic that we are doing. It's not that I happen to know Adnan or I happen to know Asim Ijaz Khwaja. We are playing the long game over here, and so far it is working. Some of their research is maturing to a stage that you can draw certain conclusions. We have partnered with IGC, in which they are now actually placing human resource within the urban unit, much more competent human resource within the urban unit, to do some work for themselves, and also the spillover benefit to the urban unit. So I think that was the response to your question, that why are we doing it. We are doing it, and we hope that it will pay off.
So just a quick question to Rab and Manur. I'm not a big fan of beneficial taxation. It sounds fantastic. I mean, it's a good concept, but obviously there, it sort of militates against the ability to pay principal as well, right? In the sense that there are many communities, especially aapne kuch photographs dikhai, where I would think what they would be below the threshold of anything, property taxation, income taxation, so how do you provide them services if they aren't able to pay for it? Then would you say, okay, we're not paying for your services? So I mean, it's an honest question. I mean,
Thank you. I mean, so you just took some of my thoughts, because I was going to come back with saying two things. One point I wanted to make was that not taxing, and that's what to do with exemptions that we talk about, and exemptions also then, and it's directly linked to, say, other land taxes. When you're not taxing a sector, then when we say tax is equal to building capacity, and capacity builds as you tax, it's interactive. When you're neglecting a sector for taxation, you're also neglecting its data accumulation, right? You don't know where the sector is going. You don't know what is the strength or weakness of the sector, and the government shows a blind eye to the sector. Classic example, agriculture in Pakistan. For the British to exploit this sector and extract from this sector, they built canals. They brought more land into agriculture, and whatnot. Agriculture university, this, that, productivity. So you can turn the whole argument on its head and say, कि जी, आप जब exemption दे दी tax की, it's going to get neglected in the long term. मांगते हमारे भी businessmen जी बस क्या we exempt कर दें हम, not knowing how it's going to pay off. But coming more directly to this service provision, what I had written down was the neoliberal city, and if you also look at the private sector a little bit, and Umar from urban developments, the neoliberal city, where most people sitting here do not pay for any service, probably, except the street. Now, for people who have the ability to pay, the ones who don't have the ability to pay, don't pay tax, they're there. But the ability to pay, why would they pay taxes when they don't access those public services, except the street? Because they buy their own water, they buy security, they buy schooling, and they buy health. So they say, why should we pay for it twice? Right? So, I mean, these are some bigger questions and then feed into voluntary compliance. Because you're supposed to tax the rich and pay for the poor, right? That's how the poor gets covered. So, with our cities urbanizing very rapidly, it's what 3.2% the growth rates of the cities, and sprawls. So how are we going to cut it? You know, it's a circular kind of argument going in reverse. But Umar, I mean, you don't have to respond to these. I mean, I just thought of these things, so there's weighted response time. But your views on it generally, the presentation piece.
Ji, thank you, Mustafa. Mustafa, I think what Turab mentioned and what earlier Manu's presentation mentioned, I think the big elephant in the room is probably the whole, I think, legal structure of the whole thing as well, that your local government systems are not, or the structure is not बेसिकली उसको बनाया ही नहीं गया ये डिलीवर करने के लिए कि वो लोगों को सर्विस डिलीवरी उस तरह प्रोवाइड करे. I think we have some examples which I think you alluded to. For example, why barrier town may people live happily, or I will put my neck on the line for DHA में क्यों लोगों को थोड़ी सी बेहतर सर्विस, उनको पता है कि वॉट एवर दे वुड पे, आप उसे टैक्स कहें या जो भी सर्विस फ़ी कहें, उनको पता है कि उसके अगेंस्ट उनको थोड़ी सी सिक्योरिटी भी बेहतर मिल रही है थोड़ा सा. तो this thing is already happening in silos for probably the elites of this country, not for the common man, but for the elites. We'll wait for this SERP's third experiment on beneficial taxation as and when the result comes, whether it leads to improvement in tax payments, which I hope it does. But the next question would be what to do now with this kind of data coming in. And maybe Umar Saab is right that Asim Khwaja or Adnan Kadir then brings that a bit of more weight to the table when they say that this has happened and we have seen it, so you can implement it in this particular locality or wherever you want to do. So I do think that there is a hope in, respectfully, what Shirani Saab was suggesting, or probably you are not a big fan, but I also think that it's always works when the way they are doing that 35% or 40% or whatever that amount would be spent locally and rest would be spent on communities which don't have the capacity, then it would work. But I agree that if you decide that whatever Naran pays, with the whole amount would be spent there, then probably it would not be justified socially. Yeah, thank you.
So just on this, sorry, let me just clarify. I wasn't talking about the tourism type. That makes sense because you have relatively rich people who can afford to do the domestic tourism coming to these places and degrading the natural environment and and whatever. So that makes sense. But I was talking about जैसे मानूर ने present किया ना बाकी communities में whether they don't have the ability to pay and how should they be made to pay for the services.
Shirani Sahib, I will add to your point and give them a specific example. In Peshawar, PDA, Peshawar Development Authority, they are collecting taxes from Hayatabad and university towns. They are the posh areas of Peshawar, like DHA of Lahore or DHA of Sindh. However, they have ring fenced themselves, and whatever the tax is collected, they do not submit it to the finance department, and they again spend it again on Hayatabad and University Town. Now, I being a resident of Hayatabad, it's good for me that sometime my payment is perfectly fine and they will rebuild it before the end of the budget year. But that's not good for the overall Peshawar. बाकी जो ऐसे इलाके हैं जहाँ से कोई टैक्स कलेक्ट नहीं होता, वहाँ पे पीडी ऑपरेट भी नहीं करता, WSSP करता है, तो उनको ये सब नहीं जाता. तो आई विल अगेन तुराब साहब और मानूर के लिए स्पेसिफिक एग्जांपल के हाउ टू एक्विटीज़ में कैसे इंश्योर करेंगे. इफ़ यू रिंग फेंस ऑल दीज प्लेसेस और वो खुद ही अपना
I think in literature में, when you talk about hypothecation and ring fencing, एक तो है ना, I mean, जिसे कहते हैं strong hypothecation or, narrow ring fencing, के जैसे, you take a toll tax and you know that money is going to be spent on the road. There's an entry fee to a park, that that's going to go to the maintenance of the park or conservation of that park. I think this, जो आप बात कर रहे हैं, I think that will work in sort of this soft hypothecation idea, weak hypothecation. Okay, at least a portion of it is spent, and the rest is spent on other areas, perhaps because they're economically more backward and they're not generating that much money. दूसरा है ये strong hypothecation, इसमें एक और भी problem है, which is pro-cyclicality. I mean, आपके tourism में, for example, seasons होते हैं, so in low season, then suddenly the revenue, so you need to supplement it with other sources of revenue or other instruments also. So I think it's not it, and as an example, it is good because, again, going back to the fundamental question that the compact between the citizen and the state is broken, perhaps to, in some sense, re-establish that compact. You need that at a local level, both municipal type of taxation and service delivery. That does not mean that all taxes are hypothecated and ring fenced. Yes, you have to pay your income and wealth tax, and the government has to decide where to spend it. And they obviously have to cross subsidize areas which are poorer, which cannot generate that much revenue or income. So that is, I think, but to just get the ball rolling, I suppose you need to, yeah.
Tax, at least I can say, I mean, the redistributive element of direct taxes generally is pretty much given. And it's not totally beneficial to yourself, but that it's redistributive. I mean, wealth tax, income tax, even property tax, as long as it stays within the same locality. But even there's a self-interest, because then if there's improvement in the area, basically your capital value is going to go up. So if it's a street behind you, left, right, you might not be using it, but the value of your house will go up. So, Umar, please.
Yeah, when it comes to this idea of beneficial taxation, there's a exercise we do, but we never really take it seriously. That whenever we are trying to make a development project, there is a little survey done. The urban unit always, does it, that if water, how much would you pay for good water and sanitation, or how much would you pay for regular garbage collection? And the percentage who are willing to pay a user fee which can cover the operational cost and some part of even the capital expenditure is extremely high. So this cannot be an anomaly. Everywhere we go, people are actually saying that we are willing to pay this. They would not be answering us like this if they were and the percentage is so high, it's 80+% who are actually, they are even willing to pay I think 40 to 50% even for green spaces. Just imagine that, and we are talking middle to low income. I'm not talking about DHA or Gulberg. I'm talking to middle to low income secondary towns and cities, even villages where people are actually willing to pay for services. I think the tension really comes, and this is from personal experience. The urban unit was once tasked to do a similar development need assessment for Bharti, the village of ex-chief minister Mr. Buzdar. And that yielded that 72% of the people were interested in better water provision, and only 24% were interested in good road network. So once the plethora of his development schemes came for the P&D for approval, somebody, I was not even attending that meeting that day, somebody quoted our report and said that the urban unit survey shows that the priority is water and sanitation and not roads. And I was not there. And in the afternoon, in the evening, the secretary P&D rings me, sir, there is a problem. And I said, what is the problem? Because urban unit is so remote that we hardly have any problems. So he said that, your report has created a furor. The chief minister is very angry. And he said, what does the urban unit know? I am the MPA from that constituency. I know what are the needs of that thing. And then I actually received a WhatsApp message. I'll not name the secretary to chief minister, who said, partner, you need to support the CM. Okay, so the issue is also of political economy. I think our citizens identify their needs very well. They are willing to pay for those needs, but somewhere that thing gets short circuited by the politician. And most of the time it is the provincial politician, not the local one. The local one knows that as Mustafa pointed out, the loop is very tight. But for the provincial politician, this is a whole whole different thing.
Thank you. So next sort of take on Nurul Haq Balod Sahab, the chairman of Balochistan Revenue Authority. Please, sir.
मतलब बलूचिस्तान में भी हम लोग देखिए लोगों के इश्यूज खासकर हेल्थ और एजुकेशन और पता नहीं क्या होंगे, लेकिन वी वर आल्सो सरप्राइज टू सी कि जब एक सर्वे रिपोर्ट आया तो 70% जो लोगों का इश्यूज थे वो वाटर रिलेटेड थे. बट जो द पर्सनस हु आर हेडिंग द PND एंड द पर्सनस हु अप्रूव द स्कीम्स, तो सबसे बड़ा सेक्टर्स जो पैसे ले जाता है वो कम्युनिकेशन एंड वर्क्स यानी कि रोड नेटवर्क है. ये बहुत बड़ा एक इशू, बहुत बड़ा एक सीरियस को है. लेकिन इसका अगेन जो सोल्यूशंस है ना, एक्चुअली बेसिक जो नीड्स हैं, वाटर इज़ ए वेरी बेसिक नीड ना, तो लोकल प्रॉब्लम्स के लोकल सोल्यूशंस, तो लोकल प्रॉब्लम्स के लोकल सोल्यूशंस लोकल टैक्सेशन में ही फाइंड किए जा सकते हैं. वन ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स. बट स्टिल सुबह से मैं अभी तक एक चीज़ मेरी कन्फ्यूजन चल रही है कि पंजाब में हु असेस द प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स? एक्साइज टैक्सेशन डिपार्टमेंट. तो अगेन जब जिसके लिए आप टैक्स लगा रहे हैं, क्योंकि दिस इज वेरी लोकल टैक्स ना, इट्स नॉट ए टैक्स के जो कि पूरे प्रोविंस पर या पूरे मुल्क में. अब फर्ज करें इस्लामाबाद बैठ के कहे कि मैं आज से प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स डिटरमाइन करना शुरू कर लूँगा, तो इट लुक ऑकवर्ड्स कि इस्लामाबाद कौन है कि बैठ के वो चागी और मुसाखिल और डेरा गाजी खान के टैक्स को असेस करना शुरू कर ले, प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स को. सिमिलरली क्वेटा बैठ के या लाहौर बैठ के अगर असेस करना शुरू एक्साइज टैक्सेशन डिपार्टमेंट. फर्स्ट तो ये है कि आई थिंक कि अगर ये चूँकि बहुत एक लोकल जो सॉल्यूशंस इसके मिल जाते हैं, तो अगर इसको प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स को अगर एक्साइज टैक्सेशन डिपार्टमेंट असेस करता है और कलेक्ट भी करता है, तो फिर तो आप दो और गुनाह कर रहे हैं ना, प्लस एक और गुनाह करप्शन भी, क्योंकि असेसमेंट भी मैं कर रहा हूँ, कलेक्शन भी मैं कर रहा हूँ, और स्पेंडिंग के लिए अकाउंट 1 में जा रहा है या प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट के पास जा रहा है. तो वाई आई शुड पे द प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स? तो जब तक इसकी असेसमेंट, जो मैंने कहा ना, मुझे अगर आई विश के दिस इज़ आवर प्रपोजल फ्रॉम द BRA, मे बी द BRA विल बी द फर्स्ट अथॉरिटी हो जाए जो कि प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स में इन्वॉल्व हो जाए. एक्चुअली लास्ट ईयर जो फाइनेंस बिल बन रहा था, तो हम एक्साइज टैक्सेशन डिपार्टमेंट के पास गए, हमने कहा जी यू हैव फेल्ड, आप नहीं कर सकते हैं इसको, कि आप 19 करोड़ इज़ नथिंग. क्योंकि अर्बन यूनिट और ये आए थे, 200 क्वेटा में भी एक प्रेजेंटेशन थी, उन्होंने कहा था जी आप तो बिल्कुल जस्ट 1% या 0.1% भी आप और नहीं कर रहे हैं. बट अगेन दे हैव देयर ओन सॉल्यूशंस एंड लाइक देयर कि जी हमारे इंस्पेक्टर्स के पास पावर्स नहीं है, हमारे कलेक्टर्स के पास पावर्स नहीं है, हम इंक्रीज़ कर देंगे. इस साल उन्होंने इंक्रीज़ कर दिया, और अभी भी फिर वी वर सरप्राइज्ड कि एक फ़ोन कॉल आया और उन्होंने टैक्स लेना ही बंद कर दिया. तो हमने कहा लेट इट्स टू बी डिवॉल्व टू दी, मतलब हमारा जो मॉडल जो हम प्रपोज कर रहे हैं, मे बी नेक्स्ट लेट्स सी कि हु फॉर्म द गवर्नमेंट, अगर सही मानों में कोई आ गया तो हम इंशाल्लाह इसको वी विल बी अचीविंग द फर्स्ट एवर लेजिस्लेशन जो कि हम प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स कर लें, कि मतलब जो कंसर्न्ड लोकल कौंसल अथॉरिटी होगा वो असेसमेंट वही कर ले, कलेक्शन वो नहीं कर लें. कलेक्शन कोई भी एजेंसी, फर्ज कर BRA, क्योंकि सबसे ज़्यादा इस वक्त एफिशिएंट है, कि आप BRA के हवाले कर दें. और हर लोकल कौंसल्स के लिए अकाउंट्स क्रिएट किए जाएंगे. अब मैं जो सुन रहा था फजल साहब से, आई थिंक कि एक जो फेलियर हो गया उसमें ये था कि आपने ये तो कर दिया कि जी उस एरिया में टैक्स स्पेंड किया जाएगा. फॉर एग्जांपल अभी वो फजल साहब चलेगा, मैं उससे ये क्योंकि लर्न करना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि प्रपोजल हम लेके जा रहे हैं. बट अगर आपने ये गलती कर ली कि आप उस टैक्स को डायरेक्टली डेबिट कर लें टू दैट अकाउंट, आप अपने कलेक्शन कर लिया आपने, लेकिन ये हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट या हर लोकल कौंसल या हर म्यूनिसिपल कमेटी के पास हम कहें अकाउंट हो जाए, डायरेक्टली उनमें ही डिपॉजिट हो जाए। आपका पैसा आया अकाउंट 1 के बजाय डायरेक्टली उसमें चला गया। और अगर एक असेसमेंट वहाँ हो जाए और कलेक्टिंग BRA हो जाए और फिर स्पेंडिंग ज़ाहिर है डेफिनेटली वो कर लेंगे। तो अगर कुछ टाइम के बाद जब पब्लिक का जो ट्रस्ट डेवलप हो जाएगा कि यस कि जो प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स हमने दिया था वो हम पे स्पेंड किया जा रहा है, क्योंकि लेजिस्लेशन भी इंशाल्लाह जो शेयर कर लेंगे इस चीज़ को कि आप हमें गाइड कर लें कि अगर फ़र्ज़ कर लें, आई थिंक आई डोंट नो कि क्या इस तरह का मैकेनिज़्म इस वक्त पाकिस्तान में कहीं अवेलेबल है कि प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स को लोकल लेवल पे असेसमेंट का एक मैकेनिज़्म, बल्कि इवन हम कहते हैं कि सेल्फ असेसमेंट पे चला जाए। आप मॉडर्न IT टूल्स हैं, अगर आप फ़र्ज़ कर लें सपोज़ पेट्रोल पंप ओनर्स हैं, तो आपने सेल्फ असेसमेंट कर ली कि जी यस दिस इज़ माय एरिया एंड ये है और मैं पेट्रोल पंप मैंने लगाया तो मैं इसको टैक्स जमा कर लूँगा। फिर उस सेल्फ असेसमेंट को वेरीफाई करने का ज़रिया वही लोकल कौंसल्स के अथॉरिटीज़ हो जाए और कलेक्शन भी उनके पास चला जाए। तो अगर आई डोंट नो कि पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त के कोई इस तरह का मैकेनिज़म्स हमने बनाए थे या नहीं बनाए थे, लेकिन बट अदर देन दिस प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स हो या बेनिफिशियल टैक्सेशन को अगर हम देख लें तो टैक्सेशन फेलियर में जाएंगे कि अगर उनकी असेसमेंट और कलेक्शन और स्पेंडिंग डिफरेंट या सही मानों में नहीं हो जाए। थैंक यू सर।
So eliminating because you're starting out, tax collector Punjab में है, you know, you can go on the net and calculate your own tax. अभी पता नहीं कितना kick in हुआ है, वो actual use कितना होता है. You can at least double check कि जो आपको जो bill आ रहा है. Multiple systems, levels of government involved होती हैं, मगर उसमें जैसे मैंने कहा बड़ी cooperation चाहिए होती है जो यहाँ शायद नहीं है. मोस्ट सिंपल टैक्स है ये, जैसे चूल्हा टैक्स भी कहते थे, ये एक ज़माने में UK वगैरह पे तो खिड़कियों पे भी लगता था, तो आपको कई बिल्डिंग्स नज़र आएंगी जो खिड़कियों में उन्होंने ईंटें लगा दी, फिर दे विल मूव थ्रू, इट्स अ लर्निंग सिस्टम, यू नो. सो बट Punjab I think will be at least I can say for myself, but having spent 5 years of my service initially in Bloistan, I'd be happy in my personal capacity to help you with whatever I can. But that brings me to somebody who can really help you. is Farzana Noshab, who is the economist for the Asian Development Bank. Please, your views on, you've been sitting there since morning listening to all of us. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I must say that I thoroughly enjoyed discussion today. Initially, when I received the invite, I wanted to come specifically for this session. But somehow I decided, okay, let's go. In fact, one of the reasons was your presentation in the morning. So I came over and then I couldn't move out of the room. I kept sitting. It was a lot of learning. Like Turab, I'm not a tax administration or a tax expert or a practitioner. I'm an economist. And in that capacity, I have been engaged with FBR starting 2021. We are implementing a domestic resource mobilization program, which is partly FBR, partly Ministry of Finance. So this domestic resource mobilization is in a wider sense of definition that includes expenditure as well as non-debt creating resources as well, in addition to the revenue mobilization. But I think we've had in the last session, the discussion was very complex. Actually, to me, I need to learn more about it on this beneficial taxation, so that I can also, I have some questions with regard to whether the money created out of the revenue should be spent on that particular locality, and they will not be using, getting out of that, because if it is spent elsewhere, certainly they are not staying locked in within that particular area, they are moving out as well. So they are using other resources in other areas where money will be spent. Questions like this, but it's a good learning. So coming to ADB's program, this is a policy-based lending program that we are implementing, which means it is a budget support program and money goes to Ministry of Finance, which FBR really has its reservations that what do we get out all the reforms that we've been implementing. But I will share some of the outcomes that we had, and that also are relatable to today's discussion on the behavior. We started with assessment of the tax administration called Tax Administration Diagnostic Assessment. We did in 2021 of the FBR only. It is just like a PIFA assessment where we have those rankings of the various indicators are already identified. This is an IMF module, and Pakistan's FBR's tax administration was ranked on that. And one of those was that Pakistan is weak on on-time filing of taxes. So when I came to this meeting in the morning, and there was a lot of discussion with regard to the behavior, organizational behavior, I just related it to the fact that perhaps this particular, I mean, sometimes these organizations, they shape the behavior of the taxpayer as well. For instance, every time we have a tax filing date, it is extended. So now it has become, a norm. Everybody will keep waiting till the end of the month and next month and next month, to the point that we reach middle of the fiscal year, mostly in January. So that has become a norm. We do not file taxes on time, and that is why Pakistan got either C or D rating in that particular indicator. So this is one. In the end, it was mentioned, courts behavior was mentioned. Again, that is linked to another policy action that we had. We worked with the Federal Board of Revenue on the 4 IRS laws, GST, income tax, federal excise duty, and ICT on services. And the objective was to have these provisions simplified across all 4 laws and have a unified law. So one code for all these, so that it is simplified, and it facilitates taxpayers who are paying GST, who are paying income tax at the same time, but they are using different books, they are using different provisions within the tax. So we were able to get one document done, and FBR chairman changed. He was very supportive at that point in time. By the time we reached towards the end of the first program, we found out that FBR is not interested anymore in having one code, considering court cases, stay orders that this would bring in to the FBR, and they would not be able to implement this law. So we had to go back to our consultant, and we got all these changes inserted in the 4 laws. So now the laws are separate. There was a duplication of exercise. We still have this, in fact, in a private sitting, FBR as well as the consultant, who is also an ex-FDR, that the single code is the best solution. But sometimes the court decisions, perhaps they don't even have these expertise to decide on the income tax related matters. This becomes, this impedes the good reforms or even good initiatives that these authorities, they really want to implement. So that was second with regard to behavior. And Shirani sir mentioned that somebody from judiciary should have been here. So now I feel that somebody from a politician should have been here as well. Perhaps they can have some defense offered here. So the next reform that we implemented was, that again was finding from the tax administration diagnostic assessment. It was that FBR never had a systemic taxpayer survey of its own product and services. So when this was discussed with FBR, they were very, very reluctant. And upfront, we were told that, okay, we know that will be negative. That was the response. We already know it will be negative, so there is no need to have such survey. We had a couple of sessions with them, and we tried to convince them that, look at the positive, that FBR itself is conducting the survey. ADB is just helping you out. We will hire a firm, but it will be led by FBR, and then it will be posted on the FBR's website. The findings will be posted. So finally they agreed, and we conducted a survey of around 550 firms across Pakistan in big cities, Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, to start with. Now the next stage was that reluctance came from the other side, the corporate sector. They were not ready to respond to get engaged, fearing that FBR can use their responses and so basically the distrust. Finally, we ended up getting their responses. Mostly we were able to, it was a good survey. It wasn't that bad for FBR. It is on the FBR's website now. So this is another positive that I thought I should share, that institutions can do, they can take initiatives, they can introduce such reforms, and uh, and finally on the tax policy, very valid, candid debate on the separation of tax policy and administration. I was just telling in the break, Shirani Saab, that federal cabinet had approved the separation of tax policy and administration back in 2019. Hamad Azhar was federal minister at that point in time. The only decision he had to make was that it should go to the Ministry of Finance. Usually around the globe, it is housed, a tax policy unit is set up in the Ministry of Finance for the reason because it is not just tax policy for tax collection, it is about its spending, its distribution, and every other agency or the thematic area is involved in there. It is not just about revenue. So, but that did not happen. And I think in past 5 years, almost every donor, multilateral, that includes IMF, World Bank, and ADB, we had tried our best to make it happen. It was not done for the reason that Ministry of Finance has no spine to do that, and the candid answer was that, oh, we want to take FBR on board, and FBR is that over our dead body, we don't want to get it done because this is in our business rule, this is the first thing, and for them, Ministry of Finance has no capacity at all. In doing so.
So just for context there, Farzana, as I mentioned, this actually, we agreed to this in 2008 when I was negotiating with the IMF as part of the Ministry of Finance, this and the Treasury single account. And it's been part of every IMF program since then. We've agreed to it and not been able to do it since 2008. So this also highlights the strong vested interest and the inability of higher levels to referee. See, somebody should be saying, look, this is in the interest of the country. Exactly. But, you know, so it's been 16 years.
Yeah, but happily, I wanted to report that Treasury Single Account is part of the same program that we are implementing, and it is happening now. So that is a good news. But on this, now we noted that SIFC-led initiative has actually, they have focused on it, and once again, the cabinet has, I think it was approved last week or week before, the separation of, there were two reforms regarding FBR. One was regarding separation of customs, and second is regarding separation of tax administration and policy. And policy was to be brought to the Ministry of Finance, headed by a board. So there was a structure that was shared and cabinet approved it. But then the election commission came in and ruling out that this is caretaker government and they are not rightly placed to implement it. So once again, it is delayed. But even election commission, election commission has also a ruling. So commission role is not mitigated. Okay, still there. So they will be vacated. Yeah, but there you go. So that has happened once again, but we are still there and holding that perhaps the new government takes this into account. We still have second sub-program to be implemented, and we will be happily taking it. This is very important reform. I think I should stop here, being the last ones to. I think there is one more speaker to follow. So just to, thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Farzana. That view is very important from where you're sitting. You know, so you're talking about taxpayer behavior and how policy can sort of obviously affect that, and you haven't mentioned amnesty schemes, right? But listen, I mean, we need to move on to the last speaker. We're almost out of time. So Taimur Khan from SEED, your views, please.
From SEED, firstly, thank you everyone, CDPR, all the speakers. It was a great learning experience for me. I'm not a tax person, but really enjoyed the whole session. I will mostly talk about behavior insight and BIU because in SEED I look at the component. We have been able to connect with some of the best academics, whether it's from LUMS or whether it's from abroad. We have been able to create the buy-in within the previous political government, and we were able to have a good space in the finance department. What we were not able to do is create the buy-in in the bureaucracy because it's a new concept and it will take time, and we knew that we must have some good results, and it will create itself. The buy-in will be created itself. We are working on it. We are done with one experiment. We are in the middle of another experiment. We have now engaged most of the Peshawar University, UAT, the good universities over there, and we are doing some green nudges over there, which hopefully will make the campuses more greener. We are also starting some nudges around urban mobility, which will create some buzz. But having said this, this is still a very new concept for most of the bureaucrats, and this is one area where we are struggling. But hopefully, this is the first unit. We are now listening that there is another unit which Remit is establishing in FVR, and more buy-in will be created after that, and we should be able to make this unit more sustainable in near future. So thank you. Thank you.
So I think you want to have a last go, clarify a couple of points.
Yes, just two quick comments really. So Saqib Sahab, this is more along the lines of your concerns. But one of the tensions that I personally observed in the project myself. So there is data on how revenue was allocated and what figures went into which neighborhoods and all of that. But I haven't analyzed it. Nothing's been analyzed, so please don't quote me on anything. But there was an issue of underserviced neighborhoods and overserviced neighborhoods, right? Because Lahore, you've got Lahore region A and Lahore region B. Lahore region B is relatively more affluent. Lahore region A is relatively, it's not that affluent. And so we were obviously in the project. We were the revenue was coming from people who were willing to pay, right? So there people who were paying the tax. That was from where we were sourcing, the revenues, and obviously there are people who couldn't pay, and so they weren't included in that. And so what I saw was that Lahore A really underserviced neighborhoods. Even after we provided those services, we didn't have enough revenue to provide what was actually completely required. As opposed to Lahore B, they were overserviced neighborhoods. Streetlights were already there, the roads looked great, etc. But at the local government department level or the revenue level, a certain revenue figure had been fixed for them. And so I suppose there should be more of a flexibility, I suppose, because if you've already got an overserviced neighborhood, doesn't mean you have to spend on it. You can reallocate it to perhaps other more underserviced neighborhoods. So that was one. And secondly, Umar Saab, we were talking about local politicians, and this is just like just a random comment, just a random tension that not a random tension, but a certain tension that we faced within the project was that when we were trying to deliver our services at specific service delivery points, we had local politicians come in and try to change those service delivery points. They wanted it near a. There were some who wanted it near their own houses. Some wanted it shifted to other places for political reasons, so on and so forth. And so it took a lot of effort to, and I would give a lot of credit to our field managers who have a lot of experience dealing with local politicians and all the dynamics on the ground. But it took a lot of took negotiations and pushback to sort of reach a level where we could get what we wanted and where the services were actually needed as opposed to what the local politicians needed. So there's that kind of thing that also exists. That's about it.
Well, thank you very much. And this last closing remark on RCTs that it's come a long way from mosquito nets. I think. Saksa, over to you.
Omar for the closing remarks.
Yeah, nobody is, I think, interested in any closing remarks. So I'll just thank IGC and CDPR for organizing this, and all the chairpersons of the, especially the revenue authorities who are here today. And I think it's brilliant. We will be doing something like this again. All the academics who joined us from Punjab, Sindh, and KP. So really grateful for all of you to be here. It was a very learning session for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.